300 ships faced 1,300. Let that number sit with you for a moment, because what happened next defies every principle of naval warfare, every calculation of odds, every assumption about what's possible when you're outnumbered 4-1 on the open sea. The man commanding those 300 ships had already lost everything that mattered. Admiral Yi Sun-sin, 52 years old, recently tortured, stripped of his rank, demoted to common soldier, then hastily reinstated when Korea was literally hours from total annihilation. His back still bore the scars from bamboo rods. He commanded a navy that had been destroyed. He sailed ships that looked like floating fortresses covered in iron spikes. And he was about to orchestrate the most lopsided naval victory in human history. By the time the sun set on October 26th, 1597, over 300 Japanese warships would be obliterated. 31 would sink outright, burning down to the waterline. The rest would limp away, shattered, never to threaten Korea again. Yi's losses: 13 men wounded, 0 ships sunk. Here's what I'm going to reveal. First, how Yi turned Korea's geography itself into a weapon that multiplied his tiny fleet's power by 10. Second, the revolutionary ship design that made European galleons look like floating coffins by comparison. Third, the psychological warfare tactics that caused an enemy who outnumbered him 4-1 to make fatal mistakes they'd never recover from. How could 52-year-old man who'd been tortured weeks earlier outthink 3 of Japan's most brilliant naval commanders simultaneously? Why did the most powerful invasion fleet Asia had ever seen sail directly into a narrow channel where their numbers became a liability instead of an advantage? What made Japanese soldiers, warriors who'd conquered Korea's land armies with brutal efficiency, abandon their ships in panic? How did turtle ships, vessels that shouldn't have been able to move fast enough to matter, become the medieval equivalent of armored destroyers? What kind of genius recognizes that being outnumbered 4-1 in the right place is better than even odds in the wrong place? This is the story of Admiral Yi Sun-sin and how 300 Korean ships annihilated 1,300 Japanese vessels in a battle that historians still study as the perfect example of tactical genius overcoming impossible odds. To understand how one man saved an entire nation with just 13 ships at one point in his career, we need to step back to the moment when Japan's warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi decided to conquer China and Korea stood in his way. To understand how 300 ships could destroy 1,300, let me take you to Korea in 1592, a peninsula about to become the highway for someone else's war. Toyotomi Hideyoshi had just unified Japan after 150 years of civil war. He commanded 200,000 battle-hardened samurai who'd spent their entire lives perfecting the art of killing. Now, peace threatened to make them restless, dangerous. Hideyoshi needed a new war, a grand vision to keep his warlords loyal. His target, China. The problem, Korea was in the way. His solution, give me passage or I'll take it. Korea's Joseon dynasty, enjoying 2 centuries of relative peace, refused. They'd grown comfortable, their military doctrine outdated, their generals untested. Within weeks of invasion in April 1592, 3 massive Japanese armies swept northward like a tsunami. Fortresses that should have held for months fell in days. The roads to the capital filled with refugees. Seoul fell within 3 weeks. The king fled north in humiliation. On land, it seemed like Japan would roll through Korea to Beijing within a year. But they'd made one catastrophic miscalculation. They'd forgotten about the man who controlled the seas. Yi Sun-sin was 47 when war erupted. Born into a minor noble family, he'd failed the military examinations twice, once because of a horse-riding accident that shattered his leg. He didn't enter service until age 28, ancient for a military career. By 1591, political enemies had him stripped of rank and reduced to common infantry. He should have been finished. Instead, just months before the invasion, he was appointed commander of the Left Jeolla Naval District not because anyone believed in him, but because the position was considered a backwater posting nobody else wanted. They called him the Phoenix later, but in 1592 he was just a stubborn, methodical officer who had something rare in Korea's military: actual combat experience against pirates and Joseon raiders. Here's what made Yi different. While other commanders obsessed over honor and protocol, Yi studied. He pored over Chinese naval treatises. He analyzed every naval battle he could find records of. He understood something profound, that in naval warfare, position matters more than numbers, and technology multiplies force better than courage alone. When he took command, he immediately began drilling his sailors relentlessly. They hated him for it. Within months, they'd worship him. His personal stakes were everything. His family lived in Jeolla province. His mother, elderly and frail, depended on the region's safety. This wasn't abstract strategy. Every Japanese ship that passed meant villages burning, families enslaved, his world ending. Across the water, Wakizaka Yasuharu commanded Japan's Western Sea Fleet. At 39, he was one of Hideyoshi's most trusted naval commanders. He'd proven himself in countless coastal raids during Japan's civil wars. His reputation preceded him: aggressive, brilliant, utterly fearless. He commanded fast Atakebun warships designed for boarding actions, each carrying dozens of elite samurai wielding matchlock arquebuses and razor-sharp katanas. Supporting him were two other brilliant commanders: Todo Takatora, a naval architect who understood ship design better than anyone in Japan, and Kato Yoshiaki, whose fleet tactics had crushed Korean coastal defenses repeatedly. Together, they commanded over 1,000 ships and 20,000 warriors, men who viewed naval combat as they did land warfare: close, board, slaughter. Their strategy was elegant: control the sea lanes, supply the armies conquering Korea by land, then use those same ships to ferry troops to China. They'd already shattered Korea's unprepared navy in a dozen engagements. Victory seemed inevitable. Here's what Yi faced in the war's first year. Japan deployed approximately 1,500 warships to Korean waters. Korea's entire navy, across all provinces, numbered maybe 200 ships when the war started, and most were destroyed in the first weeks by commanders who'd never fought a real naval battle. Yi's fleet in Jeolla province: 85 ships, many in poor repair, crewed by farmers and fishermen who could barely row in formation. But Yi had been rebuilding something in secret: the Joseon, the turtle ship, a vessel that would change everything. It wasn't a question of if Japan would control the seas, but when they'd transport enough troops to make Korea's conquest irreversible. Every day Japan held the sea lanes, more samurai landed. Every week, the noose tightened. Then, Wakizaka made his move. In May 1592, shortly after the land invasion began, he received orders: destroy Korea's southern fleets, secure the naval supply routes permanently. Intelligence reported that this Admiral Yi had some ships in Jeolla province, but nothing concerning. Wakizaka deployed 73 ships toward Yi's position. Here's what the chronicles don't tell you. Wakizaka wasn't worried about Yi. He was racing other Japanese commanders for glory. What Wakizaka didn't know: Yi had spent the last year preparing for exactly this moment. The turtle ships were ready. The crew drills had transformed fishermen into precise fighting units. And Yi had studied the waters of southern Korea. Like some men study scripture, he knew every current, every channel, every place where geography could become his ally. As Wakizaka's fleet sailed confidently toward the Jeolla coast, the stage was set for the first engagement that would shock Japan into realizing they'd awakened something they couldn't control. Yi Sun-sin was about to introduce them to a new kind of naval warfare. By 1597, Japan's combined fleet in Korean waters had swollen to approximately 1,300 vessels. If they sailed in formation, the armada would stretch for 40 miles of open water, a forest of masts and sails that blotted out the horizon. This wasn't just an invasion fleet. This was Japan's entire naval might, gathered to finish what they'd started 5 years earlier. The composition read like a nightmare: 700 large Atakebun warships, each 100 feet long, carrying 80 to 100 samurai, armed with Portuguese matchlock arquebuses that could punch through armor at 50 yards. These weren't sailors playing at soldier, these were professional warriors who'd spent decades mastering combat, now adapted to naval warfare. Another 400 medium sekibun served as fast attack craft, capable of rapid maneuvers to flank and surround. The remaining 200 vessels were supply ships and fire ships, floating bombs packed with oil and explosives designed to ram and immolate enemy vessels. At the core stood the elite, the Black Current Warriors, Todo Takatora's personal squadron of 150 ships, crewed by men who'd never lost a naval engagement. They wore black lacquered armor that didn't rust in sea spray. They trained specifically in ship-to-ship boarding actions, using grappling hooks and planks to turn naval battles into the close-quarters slaughter where Japanese swordsmanship dominated. Each warrior carried a katana sharp enough to cut through hemp rope with a single stroke, a wakizashi short sword for confined spaces, and matchlock rifles that could maintain fire even in light rain. Their weapons were cutting-edge for 1,597. Portuguese-style matchlock arquebuses, Korean captives later testified, that could punch through 2 inches of oak at close range. They carried thousands of fire arrows designed to ignite sails. They'd perfected the naval ram and board tactic that had destroyed every Korean conventional fleet they'd faced. Here's what made this fleet historically terrifying. Its daily food consumption equaled a city of 30,000 people. The logistics alone required 200 dedicated supply ships just to keep the fleet fed. Japan had committed resources equivalent to half its annual military budget to this single campaign. They weren't here to raid. They were here to erase Korean naval resistance from existence. Against this tsunami of ships and steel stood Admiral Yi Sun-sin with exactly 13 vessels. 13. Let that number echo for a moment. After 5 years of war, after political betrayal, torture, and Korea's navy being shattered repeatedly by incompetent commanders who replaced Yi during his imprisonment, this was what remained. 13 Panoxion warships, each around 100 feet long, each crewed by 130 men who'd stayed loyal when others deserted. But here's the quality versus quantity argument that mattered. Each of Yi's ships represented the culmination of 5 years of brutal combat experience. Every sailor knew their station so well they could maintain formation in typhoon conditions. Every archer could hit a target at 200 yards from a pitching deck. Every oarsman could execute Yi's complex maneuvers by drum signal alone. These weren't fishermen anymore, they were the hardest-tested naval warriors in Asia. More critically, Yi had the Joseon, the turtle ships. He'd rebuilt 2 of them by October 1597. These weren't just warships, they were floating fortresses. 110 feet long, covered entirely with a curved wooden roof plated with iron spikes and hexagonal metal plates. Japanese boarding tactics, their entire naval doctrine became useless against vessels you literally couldn't climb onto without impaling yourself. The turtle ships mounted 11 cannons per side, plus bow and stern chasers, 26 guns per ship capable of firing cannonballs, chained shot, and iron spikes. Their dragonhead prows concealed forward cannons and could emit sulfur smoke to obscure movement. But even Yi's legendary discipline couldn't hide the physical toll. At 52, recently tortured, the Admiral couldn't stand for more than an hour without his back spasming. His attendants helped him board his flagship each morning. Subordinates whispered that he looked like a corpse walking. Court officials had falsely accused him of cowardice the previous year, had him tortured until his screams echoed through the capital, then expected him to save them when their appointed admiral promptly lost the entire fleet. His key commanders were legends in their own right. Na Dae-yong, the turtle ship captain whose hands bore burn scars from putting out deck fires while simultaneously directing cannon fire. And Gyeong, master of naval formations who'd fought in every engagement since 1592. Kim Eok-chu, the signal officer whose drum commands could coordinate 13 ships in complex maneuvers that looked like choreographed chaos. What made this force special despite pathetic numbers? They believed. After 5 years of Yi never losing a battle when he commanded, his sailors possessed an unshakable faith that their admiral could make miracles happen. Korean historians later noted that morale in Yi's fleet remained higher at 13 ships than in fleets 10 times larger under other commanders. But supplies were critical. They had enough gunpowder for one major engagement, maybe two if they rationed, food for 3 weeks. One lost battle meant Korea would lose its last naval defense. The battlefield Yi chose was the Myeongnyang Strait, a narrow channel between the mainland and Jindo Island, barely 300 yards wide at its narrowest point. Strategically, this waterway connected Korea's southern and western coasts. If Japan controlled it, they could move supplies and troops freely. If Korea held it, Japan's land armies would slowly starve, cut off from reinforcements. But here's what made this location Yi's secret weapon. The Myeongnyang Strait hosts one of the strongest tidal currents in the world. 3 times per day, billions of gallons of water surge through that narrow channel at speeds up to 11 knots, faster than most ships of the era could row against. The current reverses direction every few hours, creating brief windows of slack water followed by raging torrents that could spin large vessels sideways. Modern ships still approach it with caution. Japanese commanders knew the strait was narrow, but they'd never fought there. They didn't understand that in Myeongnyang, numbers became a disadvantage. Only a limited number of ships could engage simultaneously in the narrows. Maneuver became nearly impossible. And Yi? Yi had studied these waters for 5 years. He knew to the minute when the current would shift. September 1597 brought catastrophe. The Japanese army under Kato Kiyomasa captured critical southern ports. Thousands of Korean civilians were enslaved. Entire villages burned. The economic damage exceeded 100 million yang, equivalent to Korea's entire annual tax revenue. Smoke pillars rose from dozens of coastal towns. Refugees clogged inland roads, carrying everything they owned. Japanese raiding parties penetrated deep into Jeolla province, burning rice fields just before harvest. They were methodical, surgical, destroying Korea's ability to feed resistance. Then Yi did something that defied every rule of naval warfare. He sent messages to Japanese commanders, practically begging them to come fight him in Myeongnyang Strait. His own officers thought he'd gone mad. The court in Seoul ordered him to retreat inland and abandon the navy. One minister wrote, "Yi leads his men to certain death. He has lost his mind." But Wakizaka and the other Japanese commanders received Yi's pleas with savage joy. The famous Admiral Yi, the man who'd humiliated them for 5 years, was now desperate enough to challenge them openly. They saw it as proof of his desperation, his final collapse. What they didn't see, Yi was choosing the battlefield. And in Myeongyang's narrow waters, he wouldn't need 100 ships to stop 1,300. He'd need timing, position, and the courage to hold formation when every instinct screamed to flee. But Wakizaka had made a critical miscalculation. He believed Yi's challenge was desperation. He never considered it might be a dare. September 14th, 1597, Japanese scouts spot Yi's tiny fleet near Jindo Island. They report back that Korea's last admiral commands fewer than 15 ships. Wakizaka receives the intelligence with grim satisfaction. He summons his sub-commanders. Todo Takatora, commanding 500 ships, Kato Yoshiaki with 400 vessels, Kurushima Michifusa, leading 200 elite raiders. Together, they plan the final elimination of Korean naval resistance. They'll strike in one overwhelming wave. No survivors. September 16th. The Japanese fleet begins consolidating near Noryang. Ship after ship arrives, the horizon fills with sails. Korean watchtower guards report what they see to Yi. "We cannot count them all. The sea has become wood." Yi's response, recorded by his officers, "Good. The more that come, the more we destroy." His subordinates think he's either insane or concealing terror. How could 13 ships survive against 1,000 plus? Yi calls his captains to his flagship. His orders make no tactical sense. We will anchor in Myeongnyang Strait. We will not retreat regardless of what approaches. Any captain who withdraws without my signal will be executed immediately. One captain, Cheon Seong-ryong, protests. Sir, in those narrows we'll have nowhere to maneuver. They'll surround us. Yi interrupts. They cannot surround us where I've chosen. Trust the position. September 18th. Japanese scouts probe the strait. They report back. Narrow, strong currents, but navigable. The strait is only 300 yards across at the narrows, practically begging for their numerical advantage to matter. If they funnel 100 ships through at once, they'll crush Yi's 13 before he can blink. But Yi has positioned his fleet with mathematical precision. He's anchored at the exact point where the strait begins to narrow, just before the current becomes unmanageable. His ships form a reverse crescent, a formation that channels attackers into a kill zone where his cannons can achieve overlapping fields of fire. He's practiced this exact maneuver for 3 weeks. September 20th. The waiting becomes unbearable. Yi's sailors can see the Japanese fleet gathering 5 miles away. Thousands of ships. They can hear the war drums across the water. Some men desert in the night. Yi executes 2 as examples, but with visible reluctance. He tells the survivors, I understand your fear. But know this, if we fail here, every village behind us burns. Your families, your children. We are Korea's last shield. The physical suffering begins in earnest. Sailors sleep at their stations. No fires allowed at night. The glow would reveal positions. They eat cold rice and dried fish. Watches rotate every 2 hours. Exhaustion settles in like a disease. Yi himself can barely stand. His torture injuries haven't healed. Officers note he's taking poppy extract for pain, dangerous, because it dulls alertness. But without it, he can't function. His personal log entry from this night, preserved in Korea's National Museum. The body fails, but the mind remains clear. If I die tomorrow, let it be after victory. September 25th. Harassment begins. Japanese small craft dart forward, firing arrows to test responses. They don't commit to full assault. Just probe, retreat, probe again. Yi refuses to chase. Holding formation, his archers return fire efficiently, sinking 2 Japanese scout boats. But it's psychological warfare. The message, we can strike whenever we want. Korean losses mount slowly. 7 men wounded by arrow fire, 2 dead when a fire arrow ignites a deck, and the flames spread before being controlled. Every casualty chips at morale. Men whisper, when will they attack? This waiting is torture. Yi's restraint seems inhuman. Officers beg permission to sortie and disrupt the Japanese fleet. He refuses. Let them come to us. The current is almost ready. Here's what they didn't understand. Yi was tracking tides with astronomical precision. He'd consulted with local fishermen who'd worked these waters for generations. He knew that on the autumn equinox, the current reaches maximum strength. And the equinox was October 26th, 6 days away. October 24th, near breaking point, a council of captains approaches Yi. Kim Yeok-chu speaks for them. Admiral, we should withdraw to deeper waters. We cannot win here. Yi's response becomes legendary. He doesn't shout. He speaks quietly, but every word carries absolute conviction. He who seeks life will die. He who accepts death will live. 1 man can save 1,000. Today, I am that man. Tomorrow, each of you will be. Then he reveals the tactical innovation that would revolutionize naval warfare. We will not fight as they expect. When they enter the strait, they cannot all attack simultaneously. The current will disorder their formations. We will use the turtle ships as anchors floating fortresses that cannot be boarded. Our congestion will form a crescent behind them, creating overlapping fields of cannon fire. Any ship that enters the kill zone will face fire from 3 directions simultaneously. Modern historians recognize this as an early application of force multiplication through position, the same principle that would later govern modern naval tactics. Yi was essentially creating a 1,590 seconds version of crossing the T, the dominant naval tactic that wouldn't be formally codified until the 1900s. He continues, "The secret is timing. We fight during slack water, the brief period when the current stills before reversing. They'll enter confidently. Then the current shifts to ebb tide, flowing out toward the open sea. Any Japanese ship that penetrates too deep will be unable to retreat against the current. They'll be trapped in our kill zone. Their reinforcements trying to enter will fight the current. Some will lose control, crash into each other. Their numbers become a liability." The physics explanation makes sense once you understand tidal dynamics. Billions of gallons of water channeled through 300 yards create hydraulic forces that no amount of rowing can overcome. Yi was essentially baiting the Japanese into a trap where geography and hydrodynamics would do half his fighting for him. October 25th, Wakizaka makes his decision. Tomorrow, October 26th, they attack at dawn. He'll commit his entire fleet, 1,300 ships, to obliterate Yi in a single overwhelming assault. Every Japanese commander agrees. They'll swarm through the strait in waves. Even if Yi's ships are formidable individually, they'll drown in sheer numbers. What Wakizaka thinks. Yi's desperate, trapped against geography with no escape. The narrow strait might limit how many Japanese ships can attack simultaneously, but it also prevents Yi from retreating. It's a suicide stand. What's actually happening? Yi has positioned his fleet at the exact location where the strait's geography creates a natural funnel. The Japanese will enter confidently, but the narrowing waters will compress their formation. Ships will block other ships. Their numerical advantage evaporates in congestion, and when that tidal current shifts from slack to maximum ebb, flowing toward the open sea at 11 knots, Japanese ships will find themselves in a nightmare. Yi's officers notice something that night. The admiral sleeps for 4 hours, the first real rest he's taken in 10 days. When he wakes before dawn, witnesses report his eyes are clear, his bearing transformed. The pain seems gone. It's as if he's shed mortality itself. The trap Yi had spent 5 years preparing was about to snap shut. But Wakizaka didn't know it yet. Neither did the 20,000 Japanese warriors rowing toward Myeongnyang Strait. Certain they were about to witness Yi Sun-sin's final defeat. The autumn equinox morning brought slack water at 7:14 a.m. Ebb tide would begin at 7:45 a.m. In that 31-minute window, the fate of Korea would be decided. 7:02 a.m. October 26th, 1597. Admiral Yi raises his war fan, the signal every captain has drilled for 3 weeks. 3 drum beats thunder across the water. The 2 turtle ships surge forward from the crescent formation, dragon prows aimed directly at the approaching Japanese vanguard. Wakizaka, aboard his flagship, sees Yi's suicidal charge with satisfaction. The fool is attacking against 1,300 ships? Perfect. The lead turtle ship crashes forward. Cannons erupt. The sound literally shakes the air. 26 guns per turtle ship firing in sequence. Reload. Fire again. Sulfur smoke pours from the dragon heads, obscuring everything. The Japanese front line disintegrates. Wood explodes. Masts topple. Men scream. In the first 30 seconds, 5 atakebune simply cease to exist, transformed from warships into floating debris fields. Cannonballs punch through hulls 2 feet thick. Chain shot shreds rigging. Iron spikes turn decks into slaughterhouses. Wakizaka's warriors try their proven boarding tactics. They row close, throw grappling hooks. The hooks skitter off the turtle ship's curved, spiked roofs. Samurai try to climb aboard. They impale themselves on iron spikes. Those who somehow gain purchase are shot by arquebusiers, firing through covered gun ports they can't target back. This isn't battle anymore. It's industrial slaughter. Japanese ships pack tighter, trying to press through the narrows. 70 ships jam into a space designed for 20. They collide. Oars tangle. Ships T-bone each other. Yi's crescent formation behind the turtle ships opens fire. 26 cannons per ship, 13 ships, 338 guns create overlapping fields of fire. Any Japanese vessel that enters the kill zone faces bombardment from 3 directions simultaneously. Wooden hulls splinter. Ships flood and list. At 7:44 a.m., precisely 31 minutes into the battle, the current shifts. The ebb tide begins its surge, pulling toward the open sea at accelerating speed. Japanese ships that penetrated deep suddenly find themselves unable to retreat. They row frantically against 11-knot currents. They might as well try to row up Niagara Falls. Ships spin sideways. Oars snap. Vessels crash into each other, creating chain reaction collisions. The Japanese formation collapses into chaos, a traffic jam of wooden ships being swept toward Yi's waiting guns. Yi signals, advance. His crescent contracts inward, maintaining formation despite the current. His crews have practiced rowing in these exact conditions. They use the current as a weapon, positioning themselves so retreating Japanese ships are swept directly across their cannon sights. The impossible is happening before 20,000 eyes. 13 ships are systematically destroying history's largest naval invasion fleet. The killing extends for 3 hours. Japanese corpses literally carpet the strait waters, bodies so thick that turtle ships must push through floating fields of the dead. The ravines at the strait's exit become death traps where disabled ships pile against rocks, the living trampled by the dying. In 17 minutes of concentrated fire, the elite blackcurrant warriors, 150 ships that never knew defeat, simply ceased to exist as a fighting force. Survivors later testify to watching their invincible squadron evaporate like morning mist. Na De-yong, commanding the lead turtle ship, personally directs cannon fire that sinks 11 enemy vessels. His hands blister from heat, his voice goes hoarse from shouting orders, but the dragon ship never stops killing. Yi himself, despite injuries that should have kept him bedridden, stands at his flagship's command position for all 3 hours. He personally coordinates the formation adjustments that keep Japanese ships trapped in overlapping fire zones. Korean records note he killed at least 4 enemy officers with his personal bow during attempted boarding actions. Wakizaka watches his grand fleet collapse. The narrow strait has transformed his numerical advantage into a meat grinder. He signals retreat, but retreating against that ebb current proves nearly impossible. Ships trying to escape row frantically, make no progress, and drift backwards into cannon range to be destroyed. Todo Takatora's banner ship, the symbol of Japanese naval might, catches fire and burns to the waterline. The banner itself, black silk emblazoned with gold, sinks beneath Korean waters. Muslim traders in Nagasaki would later report that Japanese sailors wept when describing that banner's loss. An enemy chronicler, Yoshino, later wrote, "The Korean ships did not fight as ships fight, but as fortresses destroy armies. We could not board them. We could not sink them. We could only die." Japanese losses exceeded 300 ships, destroyed outright, 133 confirmed, sunk, another 180 plus, damaged beyond combat capability. Casualty estimates range from 8,000 to 13,000 Japanese warriors killed or drowned. Yi's losses: 13 men wounded, 2 ships damaged, requiring minor repairs, 0 vessels sunk. The casualty ratio, potentially 1,000 to 1, stands among the most lopsided in military history. Let that sink in. Yi, finally allowing himself to collapse, falls unconscious on his flagship's deck. His officers carry him below. Physicians find his pulse barely detectable, his torture wounds reopened and bleeding. But he'd held formation for 3 hours. Korea still had a navy. Japan's invasion had been stopped cold.